Now you may or may not have noticed this, but in some of our projects, there are some pieces that are embossed that maybe look like they shouldn't have been embossed because, well, they're a little bit too large to fit in this embossing folder. Now, this is an embossing folder by Doris. It's the wood grain texture. They do make it in 5x7. I believe that this one is 4x6. And you can see here, it is. Okay, so there are times where we want to add embossing, but obviously there's a bit of a limitation, a constraint. The embossing folder is not big enough. So I want to show you a little tip, and it's kind of obvious, maybe, which is why maybe I haven't done it yet, but I figured I'd do it just in case this hadn't occurred to others. So, for example, this is our little marigold wagon here. And now we happen to have some nice wood grain paper that we used here. But say you don't. Say that you just have some brown cardstock and you want to, give it a little extra life and add some wood grain texture to it. But of course, if you take a look, it's a large piece, okay? This thing spans about, it's about 10 inches long and almost 2.5 inches wide. So what you can do is actually feed this through your embossing machine twice. Okay, once with this thing halfway in, and then when you're done, you just flip it around and put it in a second time. Now, the only limitation, you can pretty much do this with anything as long as the width does not exceed the mouth of your embossing machine. Okay, so for example, my Cuttlebug, when I open it up, the actual hole or the mouth is about 6 inches. Okay, so anything that is less than 6 inches wide, you should be able to accomplish this. Now also, of course, another limitation is going to be that, well, whatever you're trying to emboss can't be longer than twice the length of the embossing folder either. Okay, so this is, like I said, about 6 inches, so the most you could go is about 12, roughly. Anything larger than that, you're going to end up with gaps, because imagine if this was 12 inches long, you could, or let's say it's 13 inches long, you could get it in 6 inches on this side, 6 inches on this side, but there will still be an inch in the middle that it won't be able to reach no matter how you try. Because obviously we can't feed it in this way, it won't work, right? Okay, so let me just show you how that works real quick. It's a very quick little tip to add embossing to, pieces that maybe you thought you couldn't emboss. So let me grab my plates real quick. Okay, so what I typically like to do is, I'll feed this in and I'll try to find a center point, something that will kind of hide the fact that we're putting it in there twice. It may not always look perfect, and if the first time you put it through, if you don't like how it turned out, you can always cut out another piece and try it again. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed this into the embossing folder here and use this line here as kind of where it ends. So it'll be less apparent that maybe there's not a seamless continuity there. So we'll pop that in, push it down like that, and just make sure that it's not moving around. Keep it nice and in place. Open up our embossing machine, and even though part of it's sticking out, it doesn't really matter. It's not going to harm that little piece that's sticking out. Okay, so let's run that through. Now this embossing folder, sometimes, because of its texture, does tend to kind of rip the paper a little bit, and that is why I keep another embossing machine on hand, and that is my Sizzix Texture Boutique. Okay, that one applies way less pressure. So you can see I've got half of this embossed. Now I'm going to feed in the other half, and I'm going to do my best to kind of just line it up and try to create some sort of continuity with the existing section that's embossed there. And it may not be perfect, but hey, unless you're really staring at the details, I don't think you're gonna notice it. Okay, so let's pop that plate on there. And let's feed that through one more time. On the other side, now this side obviously, because it's not between the plate and it's not in the folder, it's not gonna get embossed again. There we go. Oops, let me move that out of the way. And let's see how that turned out. Okay, not bad. Okay, so that is one way to accomplish it. And really it's the only way that I know of, because again, you really can't put it in like this. It just won't fit in through the mouth of the machine. Now, one other thing that we get a lot of questions about, well, not a lot, but it comes up enough to where it's in the back of my mind. Occasionally, our dreamers will ask us, do you ink before or after embossing? So let me show you what happens if you ink after you emboss. So I'm going to grab my little felt applicator and my favorite dewdrop inks. And, well, spoiler alert, you want to ink before you emboss, because if you do it after, you're going to get inconsistent results. Okay, sometimes as you're kind of grazing the paper here, obviously because of the embossing, some areas are elevated and some areas are flat, and that is going to result in, I think, an uneven distribution of the ink. Okay, this isn't really the best color. It's kind of a really dark brown. Let me get something a little bit more orangey, more colorful. There we go. That's better. And that was looking a little bit too gray. So, you know, this is actually not turning out too bad, but take my word for it. I've had instances where I've forgotten to ink things and then I've had to emboss them, and the result just didn't turn out as planned. It wasn't to my liking. Now, you know, and I guess it really also depends on the type of project you're working on. Now, like this wagon it's kind of a rustic piece, so it really isn't that big of a deal if there's a variation in the amount of ink that's being applied. But I'm going to show you here. As I'm doing this, you can tell that the areas that are raised up have taken a lot more ink. They've absorbed a lot more ink, and they're obviously a lot more vivid as far as the inking goes. And if that's what you want, then that's okay. But if you're looking for a nice even distribution of ink, I would begin with the inking and then proceed to do the embossing. And that way you will end up with, again, a much more uniform end result. But as we always say, this whole process is, well, the end result and how it looks is very subjective, and it's up to you. It all comes down to how you see the end result in your mind's eye and how you want it to look. So by all means, it's not a rule, just a recommendation and something to be aware of, so that, you know, it's kind of the safer route, I guess you could say. Okay, so you can see how more even the inking is when we're dealing with a surface that is uniform and flat. And then I'm just going to do one side of this so I can show you the end result, and you can see a side by side and how everything looks. Okay. And this just, like I said, just kind of keeps things a little more consistent. There we go. All right, so we'll pop that into our embossing folder. And another thing too, depending on which way you place your piece of paper in your embossing folder, it's either going to raise or depress the design. So just kind of give it a feel and make sure that you've got it, you know, set on the right side. I typically prefer for it to, you know, actually emboss, not deboss. Okay, so let's pop that in there. Let's move this out of the way. And pop this, run it through our Cuttlebug, which is discontinued now. I don't know why they did that. Silly, silly Cricut. Okay, there we go. All right, now let's bring this piece over here and this piece over here. And well, for one, yeah, it's just, again, this one here, this is the one that I did. This is the one I just did where I inked before. This one's a little bit after. Now again, my inking technique was a little bit different, but you can tell on this one that everything is more consistent despite the raised or embossed areas. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this quick little tip. If you did, head on over to our YouTube channel and hit that subscribe button along with the little bell so that you get notifications of any of our new releases, tips, freebies, things of that nature. And if you make or have been making anything from our website recently, we'd love to see it. So head on over to your Facebook and do a search for Dreaming Tree Group up at the top, where you can join myself and the 17,000 plus other dreamers that inspire us daily. So thanks for joining me today, and I look forward to crafting with you again.